Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. There are a lot of new special army slots coming to Warcraft Rumble with sieges and with raids, because we have wildcard slots that are going to come. Wildcard slot is always going to replace the top right slot, so for example here that horde slot, so that any mini can go there and get the army slot bonus. Then we have these diamond slots coming. Diamond slot is an upgrade over golden slot, so that's going to be +4 levels instead of +3 levels to mini in that slot. Those can be in any of the slots. And finally we have the boost slot, and boost slot is always going to be the bottom right slot, so in this picture that will be the cycle slot. And a boost slot, when you put a mini into a boost slot, then while it is in that slot it is considered to be base level 20, so full XP, but then it still gets bonus levels from rarity, from talents, and from army slots separately from that. But if it's not at max level of XP, then it's going to get some levels by being in that specific slot. And yeah, that's a whole bunch of new exciting arm slots, but where should you apply them? Which leader should you give these arm slots to? How do they work? Let's take a look. First of all, how do you get these special army slots anyway? Diamond slots are purchased, and the purchase interface looks like this, so it's exactly the same like the reroll interface. You go to the leader's army you want, then you upgrade from there, then you're going to pay the cost 200 valor, and you get to choose from 3 slots on where you're going to upgrade. You earn 200 valor from the siege, and you can earn up to 600 from one run of Molten core, 100 per boss for the first 6 bosses. So that's 800 valor for a single rotation of the raids and sieges, so that's 4 slots. And 4 slots obviously for any leader. Then there's the wildcard slot. You get the wildcard slot when you beat the final boss, the 3rd boss in the siege. And note that when you get the wildcard slot, you get to choose. You get the reward, and then you get to choose which leader you want to apply it to. You don't have to beat boss 3 with the leader that you want the wildcard slot for. Similarly, boost slot, reward for beating the 1st wing of Molten core, and also with the boost slot you get to choose. You don't have to use your boost slot on the leader that you used to beat wing 1, you can use it on any of your leaders. So there's always going to be this choice, there's also going to be this flexibility, and that means that you don't have to choose leaders that you want the slots for the fights, and you can be a little bit more strategic also on where you're going to use those slots. So given all of this, who should you upgrade? Well, primarily you should upgrade leaders that you need for progress. So let's say you're barely able to beat the 1st wing, then you might want to give the boost slot to a leader that you're going to use in the 2nd wing, so that that leader is going to have one much higher level mini, and that means that that leader is going to have much better time trying to go through the next wing. Or if you're doing Onyxia progress, for example, or if you feel that you can do the raid and then maybe just Ragnaros is a problem, then you want to give that boost slot to whoever leader you're using for Onyxia, whoever leader you're planning to use for Ragnaros. So maybe that's going to be Drakizat in both cases, for example, and then just improve your odds of going through with that army. Because you get the boost slot already from wing 1, you want to think about immediate progress. You want to think about progress that you're going to do this week. So that then the boost slot is going to help you get deeper this specific week, because next time Molten core is going to come around, you're going to get another boost slot, and that's also going to come at the start, so then you can worry about that later. You can also upgrade your PvP armies, obviously, especially with those diamond slots, because diamond slots potentially enable you to get to level 11 minis in PvP if they're fully maxed and in a diamond slot. So that's going to be pretty valuable there. And wildcard slots you probably want to use mostly for leaders who are unable to buff many minis, so that then this is going to give them more flexibility, and that's going to make it much easier to use them in all sorts of content, in raids, in heroics, even some new combinations in PvP. And when you choose your diamond slots, you probably want to take into account that the wildcard slot is always the top right and the boost slot is always the bottom right. So those are become kind of high priority also to make diamond, because that gives you more flexibility and more power for those specific slots. And when it comes to leaders not being able to buff specific minis, so being attractive targets for wildcard slots, let's take a look at few. Because Maiev Shadowsong, for example, Maiev has the longest list of minis that Maiev cannot buff. So in some ways that makes Maiev an attractive option for wildcard slot. On the other hand, Maiev typically focuses on unbounds, and Maiev is pretty good with those unbounds anyway, so maybe Maiev just doesn't need it that much. Somewhat better option might be to give wildcard slot to one of your beast leaders, like Old Murkai. Old Murkai cannot buff Banshee and Darkspear Troll. Old Murkai otherwise is a phenomenal leader. So even though there's only these 2 minis that Old Murkai can't buff, but if Old Murkai could buff Banshee, that will give Old Murkai a lot of flexibility because Banshee is a strong mini and allows for some really unique strategies, and often it's the case that you have to go with Hogger when you play with Beasts just so that you can get that Banshee into your army. So that's an option. Or of course, you can also still keep going with Hogger, in which case you might consider buffing Hogger, because Hogger can't buff any of the big tanks, and that would be a useful skill to have. So if you don't want to play with Murkai, then you could just make Hogger a little bit better. Another leader that would really benefit from wildcard slot is Rend Blackhand. Rend cannot buff spells, so cheat death, execute, polymorph, some pretty important spells, and adding those spells to Rend's repertoire could be quite powerful. However, my favorite target for wildcard has to be Horde leaders, because Horde in general has the weakest army slots. If you've ever climbed the heroics, you have noticed that, hey, somehow this Horde feels a little bit more difficult than the others, many times. And that's mostly because the army slots on Horde leaders are so bad. So giving a wildcard slot to a Horde leader would mean that they can buff many more minis, and my favorite would be Gromash Hellscream, because I think Grom is a fabulous leader, and if Grom could buff any mini, that would make Grom even stronger, so Grom would benefit from the wildcard slot even more than Sneed or Cairn. So when you choose which leader to upgrade with all of these new slots, look for ways to get immediate progress. They come quite early in the progress, so then you will be able to use that to progress further on that specific week already. Then look for your PvP armies and see how you can improve those, and then look at leaders who have weaknesses in what minis they can buff and try to overcome those weaknesses with the wildcards. And pay attention to where you put those diamond slots, because wildcard and boost are always going into specific spots, and diamond in those in addition to them might just be a good idea. Thank you for watching. Click like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and a special thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, YouTube members and Twitch subscribers who make all of these videos possible.